皆さんこんにちは。Hey, willkommen till SWiTCH Sustainability World. Mitt namn är Nanami. Jag studerar sociologi på Waseda universitet. Trevligt att träffas. 本日は SWiTCH Sustainability World にご参加くださりありがとうございます。私は早稲田大学国際教養学部の4年生でSWiTCHでインターンをしております村上七海と申します。去年までスウェーデンに留学しておりましたので、スウェーデン語でご挨拶させていただきました。どうぞよろしくお願いいたします。本イベントは一般社団法人SWiTCH主催、スウェーデン大使館協力、日本テトラパック株式会社協力、スカンジナビア日本笹川財団女性で開催いたします。スカンジナビア日本笹川財団は日本とデンマーク、フィンランド、アイスランド、ノルウェー、スウェーデン間の研究、留学、文関係において交流と相互理解を深める事業に個人、団体を問わず助成しております。まずはじめにSWiTCH Talk Series について簡単にご説明いたします。SWiTCHでは若者と大人世代の対話の場としてSWiTCH Talks を開催しています。SWiTCH Talks には3つの種類があります。サステナビリティの研究者に若者が何でも質問できるSWiTCH Talks Academics、 日本を牽引するトップランナーと若者が直接対話できるSWiTCH Talks Japan、 そして世界のトップランナーと直接対話できるSWiTCH Talks World です。本日はSWiTCH Talks World の第3回目にあたります。今回はヘーグベリ大使と日本テトラパック株式会社アレハンドロ・カバル社長にご登壇いただき、サステナブル先進国スウェーデンの歴史、文化、社会システム、ビジョンメイキングと食品システムの未来の可能性についてお話しいただきます。それでは本日の流れについてご紹介いたします。はじめにSWiTCH代表の佐々からSWiTCHについて簡単にご紹介した後、ヘーグベリ駐日スウェーデン大使よりスピーチいただき、その後アレハンドロ社長よりスピーチいただきます。スピーチの後には参加者の皆様と登壇者のインタラクティブなディスカッション、最後にはスウェーデンのお菓子や飲み物をお楽しみいただきながら交流いただくフィーカタイムがございます。どうぞお楽しみください。それではマナさんお願いいたします。
はい、皆さんこんにちは。よろしくお願いいたします。こんな夕方でちょっとお腹減っている時間だと思いますが、よろしくお願いいたします。私はSWiTCH代表理事で活動しております佐々真奈と申します。今までは COP26 日本ユース代表であったり、ロンドン大学大学院でサステナブル開発を専攻していました。で今回は、SWiTCH主催のSWiTCHトークスということで簡単に、団体概要をご紹介します。SWiTCH は私たちの熱、思いで地球を冷やすということをスローガンにして活動をしています。で大きく分かれて3つの軸で走っているんですが、1つ目がグローバルな視点から、視点を持って足元からアクションを促す、そして2つ目が世代間のギャップを埋めていく作業、そして3つ目がサステナブル化にデザインを生かしていくっていう3つの軸です。で私たちはこのSWiTCHとしてスローガンはあるんですが、未来の主人公である若者世代、一緒にその若者世代と一緒にサステナブルな社会を作っていくために活動をしています。でその中で、たくさんプロジェクトを進めているんですが、一つはこういった対話会ですね。そして他に、プロジェクトを2つ大きく分かれて実施しております。1つ目が100万人のサステナブルアンバサダー育成というプロジェクトです。で私たちは、大阪・関西万博が開催される2025年に向けて100万人のサステナブルアンバサダー育成プロジェクトというプロジェクトを持っています。じゃあ何をしようとしているのかなっていうと、やはりサステナブルが自分ごと化になって働いたり暮らして大学行ったりいろんなことをできるサステナブル人材を育成しようとしています。で現在はこのアンバサダー育成の e ラーニングを国連環境計画を皆さんと一緒に作成しています。そして2つ目が若者、大学、企業、そして自治体が一緒になって サステナブルな都市づくりをするプロジェクトです。これは今年の G7 がスタートとなり、環境、について専門的な学生さんたちと一緒になって、大学、企業、そして自治体さんと、どんなアクションがしたいのかな、どんなサステナブルな都市に住みたいの、今足りてないことって何かなっていうことを質問しながら一緒に考えて実行に移すまでの行動を伴った若者育成プログラムとなります。なので大きく分かれて他にもプロジェクトはあるんですが、今回はこの2つをご紹介させていただきました。そして今日は、こういったプロジェクトもやっているんですが、対話を皆さんと一緒にしたいと思い、SWiTCHトークスを開催しています。皆さんにとってサステナビリティというのは身近になっている人と、まだまだ初めましてというところの人たちがいると思うんですが、本日は食の目線からサステナビリティってどうすればいいのかなっていうことを、ご紹介するために若者たちを応援したいとても特別なメンバーの大人メンバー2人がご参加いただいてます。でその2人に、バトンタッチをする前に、この、タイトルですね、サステナブル先進国スウェーデンの食品システムの未来とはについてお話しする前に、食品システムって何ぞやっていうお話をします。まず食品システムとは何か、食料品の生産、加工、流通、そして消費を一つの体系として、話している言葉です。じゃあ食業界ってどのぐらいインパクトあるのっていう話ですね。実はフードシステムは GHG に、温室効果ガスでいうと世界の 26% も占めているんですね。なので私たちが毎日食べている食べ物というのは実は結構大きなインパクトがあります。でその食関係においても、この右の図を見ていただくバーを見ていただくと分かりますが、サプライチェーンが 18%、31% が家畜、そして 27% が農産物、そして 24% が土地利用っていう大きな項目が分かれています。なので食べ物においても案外ちょっと複雑なんですね。流通も問題あるし、パッケージングでパッケージングを消費者に渡った後どうすればいいのかな、そんな話までが全部食の中でできるんですね。なので今回は、このポイントを踏まえて、じゃあどう変えていけばいいのっていうことを実はヨーロッパが主体的となって取り組みをスタートしています。で一つ皆さんにご紹介したいのが、このフードシステム全体のサステナブル化に向けて、EU が掲げる戦略です。これは Farm to Fork といいまして、農場から食卓までどうすればいいのかなということを考えた4つの大きい項目で分けた取り組みです。1つ目が、持続可能な食料生産をすること、そして2つ目が持続可能な食品加工、流通、そして食品サービスを提供していくこと、そして3つ目が持続可能な消費、食生活を一人一人の人たちが変えること、そして4つ目が食品ロスの削減です。で5つ目は実は食料安全保障ということで、食料をちゃんと輸入するだけではなく自給自立をしていく必要性があるっていうことが5つ目の項目になります。なので本日はこういった食って言っても食べるだけの話じゃなくて、サプライチェーンの中をどうやって変えていけばいいのかなっていうことをプロの皆さんにお話しいただいて、スウェーデンの目線からお話を伺いたいと思います。さてここからはちょっと私がマイクを渡して大使にお話を伺いたいと思いますので、大使よろしければこちらの方にお願いします。はいありがとうございます。でペール・エリック・ヘーグベリ大使についてご紹介いたします。Thank you。はい、彼は駐日スウェーデン大使としても3年間働いていらっしゃいまして、駐ベトナム大使を今まで務めてきました。そしてスウェーデン外務省アフリカ局長でもあり、スウェーデン芸術評議会国際部会課長および、在南アフリカスウェーデン大使館一等書記官なども今まで歴任されてきました。ということでスウェーデンを本当に長い間支えてきた人材としていろんな活動をしている中で、日本そして世界を見たとき、 今日本の中で何をすればいいのかなっていう視点もたくさん聞けると思いますので、大使のお話すごい楽しみにしています。ということでヘーグベリー大使にマイクを渡してお話をお願いいたします。
ありがとう。Thank you very much, and thank you for the invitation. Great to be here. And excuse me speaking in English. I don't think you want to hear me trying on my very limited Nihongo, using what I know. It's a very Musukashi language. But great to be here, and thank you for coming out. I have said when I've been here before that it makes me extremely happy to come to a setting that looks very unusual to the settings I usually meet. It's a fantastic thing to be the Swedish ambassador to Japan. But of course, most of the people I meet, both in business and in politics and in academia, are mainly elderly men with black suits on. And it's nice to see so many younger people and fewer ties and fewer suits in the audience. Let me talk about the Swedish experience. But before even starting to thinking about Sweden and what we are trying to do, first of all, it's June 2023. And the summer heat is starting to get to us here in Tokyo. It's unusually warm in Sweden for this time of the year. We see that it's record heat in India. We see that the ice, both on the North Pole and the South Pole, is melting quicker than it has ever done before. We shall, of course, never mix weather and climate, but it's a given that climate change is happening now. And we have to try to do our very best to react to this and act now. I think one could, of course, feel that we'll find a way. Human beings are very innovative, and we can find new innovations that will help us to deal with it. But I think we are in for a bigger problem than that. So I think the most important message from me today is that we have, all of us, have to act immediately. And I don't think it's something we can wait for governments to do or companies to do. And not least when we talk about the food chain and to think smart and sustainably about food, I think we as consumers can do a lot. And I think consumer power is very often enormously underestimated. And let me come back to that a little later, but as you heard, I've been in Japan for almost 4 years now. And I think I think one of the slight differences, perhaps, that I see between my country and Japan is that the consumers, and especially the younger consumers in Sweden, are more precise in their questions to the producers, the stores, the restaurants, the food shops, where they really ask, where is this from? Is it sustainable? Has it been fished in a sustainable way? Is it green listed or is it red listed? So I don't think one should overestimate what we can do individually, but I think each individual has a responsibility, and I'm very happy to take questions about that later. But first of all, the extraction and the processing of natural resources, they account for more than 90% of the loss of the world's biodiversity. So the 90% of what is disappearing from the biodiversity disappears because of human beings. And water shortages, as well as 50% of the climate impact globally, comes from the processing of natural resources. And over the past 5 decades, think about what has happened in only 50 years. The world's population has doubled, and the material extraction from the planet has tripled, and the global gross domestic product has quadrupled, so 4 times as high of our GDP or our economy, which at first thought sounds like a great thing, right? Our economies are growing, but the UN's International Resource Panel has recently stated that, and I need to read so I don't quote wrongly, The extraction and the processing of natural resources has increased sharply over the past 2 decades, which is now the cause of more than 90% of the loss of biological diversity and water scarcity, as well as 50% of our climate impact globally. And in order to protect our ecosystems, we urgently need to reverse this cycle. So in picture number 2, you can see that this is not an easy task. The world very often looks like this. Our industrial economies are built on and are built around rapid consumption of raw materials. And as long as the costs of these materials do not reflect the full environmental impact, the incentives for us human beings and for consumers will of course not be there to act wisely. And globally, researchers agree that there is no credible other way forward than to move into what we call a circular economy. Sweden's emissions of greenhouse gases amounted to 6.5 tons per person per year a few years ago. And the Japanese average is almost the same, it's a little bit higher, but 10 tons per year per person. And by the year 2050, the world's emission need to be reduced to under 1 ton per person. So in order for us to stay under 1.5 degrees. So if you start to think about that, in Sweden, 6.5 times less, and in Japan, 10 times less. But we shouldn't think wrongly that we need to change or diminish our quality of life then by 90%, but we need to change our behavior. 2/3 of Sweden's emissions come from households. So it's really the household emissions that are the greatest. And Sweden's goals now to reduce our coal needs are one of the most ambitious worldwide. Net zero by 2045. There is net zero, no increased gas emission by 2045. But this is energy transition, and that's only one part of the story. Material consumption also needs to be reduced. And in picture number 3, household consumption-based emissions are dominated by emissions from transport, food, and accommodation. So transport, food, and our living, that's when our emissions occur. And individual consumers, we have a responsibility to change our behavior. But as I said in the beginning, consumers alone cannot do this. We need to have companies providing us with and giving us opportunities to see that there are alternative goods and services and foods with less climate impact. So the big transition needs to be a joint project, public and private, individuals and companies and governments. And in Sweden, we are trying to do this. In January 2023, this year, the Swedish government launched a strategy for turning Sweden into a circular economy. And we see this as a vehicle to reach our national environment and climate goals and to take our responsibilities in the so-called Agenda 2030. The vision of this strategy is a society where resources are used effectively and in non-toxic circular flows. And by that, we replace virgin or extracted materials. And the Swedish strategy for circular economy provides support and direction for actors in business, the public sector, universities, civil society, in the work to contribute to this circular thinking. So the strategy contains 4 focus areas, which are closely linked together. So let me go through the 4 points very quickly so you see what we are talking about here. So number 1 is circular economy through sustainable production and production design. So we need better designed and production methods as a prerequisite. But this is also about changing products for service or functions. So we need both the sustainable production line, but also the way the production lines are designed. Number 2, circular economy through sustainable ways to consume and use materials. So here's for the consumer. How can I behave? What can I do? So private and public consumption needs to be well informed and transparent. so that choosing sustainable alternatives is easy, so that it's possible to see what is the contents of this product, what's the history, what's the origin of this product. Then another difficult issue that comes in here, we have to make sure that it doesn't become too expensive. Because if everything that is sustainable costs 10 times more, or at least double, it's also an incentive that will be hard to get over. Number 3, a circular economy through non-toxic circular systems. What does that mean? We need fully functional systems for recycling to be in place. It needs to be easy to recycle both food but also other material, and increasing the reusability of secondary material. Today, Sweden is advanced in waste combustion, and perhaps you didn't know that in Sweden we use garbage for heating and energy production. So we actually buy garbage from other neighboring countries to use them in our heating transformation and heating production. But going forward, we also realize that only the materials that cannot be used for anything else should be burnt. I think, to be a bit critical of my own country and our own system, we are perhaps burning a little too much. Even though it's a way of dealing with the waste, some of it could be reused. And number 4, circular economy should be a driving force for business and other actors through measures that promote innovation and circular business models. So we need to be innovative here. And the prerequisite for change to take place is that companies and others, that they see that this change to circularity is a mean to develop their business. And that's why I'm so happy to have Tetra Pak here today, because Tetra Pak and most other Swedish companies have, since long, I would argue, realized that adapting the business to sustainable and climate smart is not a greenwashing exercise. It's not something you do to look good. It's not something that you do because you think you have to. You do it because otherwise, sooner or later, you will go out of business. I think companies globally today that do not think about sustainability and about circular economy and changing to a more smart and sustainable way of producing and selling, they will eventually go out of business, for the very simple reason that consumers all over the world eventually will not accept that the productions and the production line and the products people are buying come from continued waste increase and climate and contributing to climate change. So it's necessary for business survival. To implement this strategy that I just talked about, the government of Sweden aims to remove bureaucratic obstacles and strengthen competitiveness and increase and contribute to the long-term conditions for circular social transformation. Which is already on the way, but it needs to be intensified, of course. And can I just go back to the last picture? There's one thing I want to mention with this. Perhaps you don't know what this Karma is. It's a surplus food app, and it's quite a smart invention. I might come back to that later. And it's actually supermarkets or places where you buy food. They advertise when things are about to expire, when the apple starts to get brown, or when the broccoli perhaps should be consumed within the next day or two, or when the milk is expiring tomorrow. There's an app where you can then check, where can I buy these things? And then the prices go down. So instead of going to the closest Maruetsu, sorry, I don't want to pick on Maruetsu, but instead of going to the closest grocery store you have, maybe you want to contribute to a climate smart behavior, but also you want to save some money. So then you check on your app and you say, if I walk another 3 kilometers or 2, they actually have things that are cheaper and they are about to expire. So instead of throwing it away, I buy it. And then this Karma idea came into birth. It's a pretty cool system, actually. Because in the end, this is all a matter of changing norms and behaviors and making it normal in societies to think and to act in circularity. To make it normal to always ask in the grocery store, where is this from? How was it fished? Where does it come from? Are the fishermen being paid in an okay way? Is this fish almost extinct? Shall I eat it or shall I not? Because if the consumers are not asking for it in the store, the fishermen eventually will not catch it because no one will buy it. And that's the normality or the consumer power I see. We all have a role to play in this, you and I, and your local shop or your local restaurant, and global companies. And in Sweden we have so many huge global companies. You saw Electrolux a little while ago. I don't want to make the long list, but you know it. It's everything from Ericsson, AstraZeneca, Electrolux, IKEA, H&M, De Laval, Volvo, Scania, Saab, and Tetra Pak. A great company that are thinking sustainably and that will now tell us about their challenges. So with that was my short introduction. If you have questions, we'll save them till later, I presume, and I'm happy to answer any questions. Arigato, thank you.
Thank you. ありがとうございます。盛大な拍手お願いします。Thank you so much. Yes. Thank you so much. はい、ありがとうございます。大使がお話しいただいたように、やはり多くの企業さんがなんでグリーン化するのかっていうのは、ただグリーンウォッシングでうちやってるよっていう広告ではなく、そうしなければビジネスがやっていけないということが本当に大きなキーポイントだと思います。そしてそのグリーン化において新しいビジネスが生まれていくので、その波を作ったり変えていくことは本当にチャレンジではあるんですが、それまたチャンスでもあるというコメントでした。大使ありがとうございます。それではセッション2に進んでまいりましょう。お二人目の登壇者は日本テトラパック株式会社のアレハンドロ・カバル社長です。アレハンドロ社長、どうぞステージにお上がりください。はい、お盛大な拍手でお願いします。ありがとうございます、カバル社長。はい、ではちょっと簡単にご紹介します。1974年生まれコロンビア出身のアレハンドロ社長は、業界で25年以上のキャリアを積んでいます。2001年にはコロンビアでテトラパックに入社後、南米アンデス地域の事業を担当しました。その後、スペインのマドリードにて営業およびマーケティングディレクター、スウェーデンにてカートンボトル担当副社長を歴任しました。そして2012年にはイタリアの代表取締役社長に就任し、3年後にはイベリアの代表取締役社長を務め、2019年からはイタリアのモデーナに拠点を置き、テトラのグループのパッケージングソリューション担当副社長を務めました。そして日本は2021年11月より韓国、そして日本の代表取締役社長に就任されて、現在は東京を活動拠点として社長を務められています。そして本日はこの食産業をどうすればいいのかなというビジネス面の代表としてカバル社長にお話をいただきたいと思います。カバル社長、よろしくお願いいたします。
So, good afternoon, everyone. I am really happy to be here with you. And especially, I hope you can learn a lot from what I will present, but also I can learn a lot from you from the questions that you will ask and from the interaction. I think we don't have the answers, but we have a lot of the questions. So maybe some of those we can solve together. The first one, and I thank Pererich, the ambassador, because he said something is how can we go out of the extraction economy? And I think there's many good ways to do that. So one of the questions that we need to answer together is how we move away from the extraction economy to a new concept that is the regenerative economy. So I will try to touch about regenerative economy, which is totally an innovative way of thinking later on. So first of all, talk about a little bit about Tetra Pak. This is our founder, Ruben Rausing. It's still a family-owned company. And he asked the right question. Like good ideas, it's about the right question. So he asked, how can I take food from production to consumption in the most efficient way? Because he saw that 50%, when he founded the company more than 70 years ago, that 50% of the food got wasted before they got to the consumer. Today, that number is 30%. So it has been reduced, thanks to food processing and packaging, but it's still a lot. So how can we move, that's the right question, to a zero waste society? The ambition is a zero waste society. And that's why food processing and food packaging are so important. And that's why we need to move not only from a linear economy to a circular economy to a regenerative economy. And it can be done. So we are present in more than 160 countries. In Japan, we have not only a factory in Gotemba, we also have a research and development center, also in Gotemba, and we employ more than 600 people locally. Globally, we sell more than 200 billion packages, and in Japan, we sell more than 6.5 billion packages. Then this is why our core to exist is we commit to make food safe and available everywhere. And that's very important, but that's not enough. So we want to protect people, society, contribute positively to society. We want to protect the planet, and of course, food. And that's our commitment to all of you, not only in Japan, but everywhere in the world. But we have to know that we live in a very complex environment. So I don't have to talk about the war, I don't have to talk about those things, but things that hurt us directly, inflation, the cost of living. Of course, war is one of the consequences, but I think we have been living in very stable economies, and unfortunately, economies are not stable, and we need to be prepared for the worst. So cost of living will continue to go up. Despite what any government will tell you, cost of living will continue to go up because supply chains are still struggling to meet all the demands. The second element is climate. I think we are not doing enough to alleviate climate change. So what can we do to alleviate climate change? Because again, the actions that governments, industries, including ourselves, and consumers are doing towards climate change are not enough. So this is actually a call to action. The third is sustainable legislation. Here, Europe is setting an example. And I have to say that in Japan, there's good initiatives, but they're not enough. And I just want to say something that was very good, which was the Plastic Circulation Act of April 2021 here in Japan stated that we would move from a 3 R's, which is reuse, reduce, recycle, which is good, to a 4 R, which is renewable. We need to start using more renewable resources because, as you say, 90% of the emissions come from extraction. So again, we need to make that extraction to be from renewable resources. As we know, fossil fuels like natural gas, petrol, or coal are finite. But not only that, the extraction is what actually makes the most contamination globally. And the last one, demographic pivot. So Japan had the third lowest birth rate. Number one is South Korea, or number one on the bad side is South Korea, which is 0.81. The second one is Italy at 0.91, and Japan is at 1.1. So these things makes us think, okay, how can we make products that are fitting to the new demographic styles, which is single households, how to reduce waste in single households, and how we make also, for the elderly people, food that is more healthy, easy to consume, and in packaging that's adapted to them. So again, this has a huge implication. We never think about demographic. It's not only about if we don't have enough children. No, society is aging. How can we make life easier for our parents, for our grandparents? And I think that's very important because I will be a grandparent hopefully soon. I'm a father, but I will be a grandparent. And I will be aging, and I will have these needs. But more than 25% of the population today in Japan is over 65. This one I will not touch today, but 1 out of 9 people go to bed hungry. And I was born in a developing country, so I know what poverty looks like. So I will not touch on it today, but it's something that we have a responsibility, and I will tell you something about it. Then 1/3 of the food produced is lost or wasted. Mana-san, I thank you for the introduction. Where are you? So, because it was spot on and you shared a lot of the data, so fantastic. And I will tell you what can we do about it. Then food system, 1/3 of the greenhouse emissions. Again, thank you. You already shared the figures. And we will need more food. We will have more individuals. So how are we going to feed the people without starving the planet? What we're doing today is we are starving the planet. And she explained the importance of food systems. It's the core of sustainability because it talks about extraction, it talks about carbon emissions, it talks about circularity, and it talks about society. So if we are able to make food systems sustainable, we will be able to meet social sustainability. In the past, I just want to tell you something. The original pillars of sustainability were economic. So basically, it needed to be economically sustainable. The second one was the environment, and the third one was society. I think we have evolved into much more complex system and interconnected because it used to be 3 pillars, and company, normally when they talk, they only talked about one of the pillars. I think now we need to talk about systems. That's why we need to talk about sustainability system, food systems, and not only standalone pillars. So low carbon circular economy is the new paradigm. It's not enough to be circular. If you are not low carbon, you're out of the game. And in Europe, all supermarkets have put a climate score. If you are not in the GLUT climate score, you cannot sell in many of the supermarkets in Europe. Again, what can we do to tell supermarkets in Japan, why don't you implement climate scores, depending on the CO2 emissions that you produce? It makes a lot of sense. Transparency. All that we need to ask as consumers is transparency. Then we can make a choice. But without transparency, we will not be able to make a choice. Then, just to let you know, consumers have the power. It's just that you don't know it. So all of you, all of your friends, all of your families have the power to make the right choices. It's just that maybe you're still not voiced it enough. But I can tell you, in Europe, consumers are voicing this. Then what's our ambition as Tetra Pak? We are not yet there, but we want to make the world's most sustainable package, made only of renewable or recycled materials. Full stop. It's easier said than done, because then we need to convince all of our customers, but that's our ambition. Today, we are at 75% renewable, but today in Japan, we will have, or we will introduce the first fully renewable package for Japan's school milk program, made of 100% renewable material. So it will only be made from renewable carton, and almost 85%, and then a small layer of either recycled polymers or polymers made from sugarcane. So I think that's very good news. But what we want is basically all of the packages made only of renewable or recycled resources. And our vision is to be fossil-free in all of our chilled portfolio by 2025, and by 2030 to be totally fossil-free. So again, the future is fossil-free. Then, it's very good news, maybe you don't see it there, but the change is starting to happen. So there's already customers like Fuji Mineral Water, they have started to pack in carton. I don't say that other packaging is bad. I think package is good and necessary independently of the package because it avoids food waste and it helps put safe food in every table. But we all need to reduce, reuse, and recycle, all of us, in all of the packaging. But we need to say which is the package with the lowest CO2 emissions. And so far, it is Tetra Pak, so it is carton. Because let's remember, we come from sustainable forests that normally are in Sweden. And one fun fact, 100 years ago, there were less forest surface in the Nordics than today. So if you have certified forestry, actually, your forests not only are better managed, they actually grow. So let's think about it when we think about other types of packaging. Then you talked about biodiversity. It's amazing how we humans are killing biodiversity. And I was with a company called Olam, with the owner and president of that company. Is one of the biggest agriculture food companies in the world, serving more than 30 billion euros. And he has to buy bees to put into their crops for pollination, because where they were buying, some of their crops didn't have enough bees to pollinize, and they were having to employ people to pollinate. Imagine a task that should be done by bees being replaced by humans. It is crazy, because nature is wise. It is us who are not wise. So we need to protect biodiversity. And that happens only if you have certified sources. So we certify everything in our package, that basically we are not deteriorating biodiversity. And actually we're asking all of our suppliers, they have already committed to net zero. And just to let you know, we have committed to net zero by 2030 in our operations, and net zero in all of our value chain by 2050. But this is absolutely critical. And then this is what we want to launch in Japan, which is really carbon neutral packaging. We have already launched it in Europe, and we want to launch it here. It means a package that does not deteriorate damage. So it's CO2. We will be able to offset most of the emissions. And what are we doing? Because we are able to go up to 95% net zero, but the other 5%, what we do is we invest in projects for reforesting. So we are actually now investing in forests for reforesting the Amazon, but we're looking for projects to reforest also other geographies. But again, we need to start checking the labels. Where does it come from, and what's the impact it has on the planet? So I want, of course, industries in Japan, and any packaging, not only our packaging, that they start talking about what's their emission, what's their footprint. Because if they don't do it, legislation will do it for them. I will not go into this because I think it was already presented. Where are the sources of economy? But I really want to show food loss versus food waste. So food loss happens when you crop the food, you bring it to the factory, and then you have food losses from where it's produced to the factory. Then you have a lot of food losses also in your factory. So we need to make sure that all of our equipment, and this is a commitment we have made, should have 50% less food losses, 50% less energy consumption, and 50% less water consumption than the existing ones. So it will only happen is also us as industries contribute. And then we need to rejuvenate, of course, a lot of the, or reuse or adapt the existing equipment to be able to meet that. Because look, 50% is wasted there. Definitely we need to change. Then we need to change also at retailer. Today, we have the best before dates. So if you see the package, a lot of food really can last maybe 2, 3, 4, even a month, but we waste it because it's a best before date. So I think we need to change the mindset of the best before date, and this we need to work with the government to the when it is safe to actually eat, not best before, but actually until when it is safe to eat, because it helps avoid a lot of food waste, and also aseptic packaging. So all of the packages you see here, they're aseptic packaging. It means they can be stored outside the refrigeration without getting damaged. They can be distributed without refrigeration. And they can be also exhibited and sold at the supermarket without refrigeration. Imagine the CO2 that we would be saving. So there's a lot of things we can do to avoid food waste. Then, of course, circular economy. I want to tell you something that it's frustrating for me, okay, is that we are not recycling a lot of cartons in Japan. If you take an average of Western European economies, they are recycling 70% of cartons. In Japan, if we weigh chilled and ambient, it's around 30%. That needs to be above 70%. There's no reason, because consumers behave well. If the government promotes the recycling and the municipalities promote the recycling, there is enough recycling capacity. But we're simply deciding to put these materials in the burnable. Why? Because they tell us to do so. So we obey. I obey. But I do something different because we are doing a lot of things to take our own products, and I know where to recycle, or we take it to the office and we recycle. But the standard consumer would put it to the burnable. When it is, the price of paper has almost increased by 30%. And Japan used to be 20 years ago, basically all of your paper towels were made from recycled materials. Today you're actually importing virgin fibers. Makes no sense when you could be basically using all of your paper towels from recycled materials. But that's a long story that I cannot tell you today. But anyhow, there's many things that you can do with our cartons, from new cardboard boxes, tissues. This is a lot of what we're doing in Japan. But we're also producing pallets, we're also producing flower vases, and we're using these pellets that basically you can replace anything that is made today with plastics, you can use from recycled Tetra Paks. So again, we're not using a valuable material simply because 40 years ago, it was not recycled. It was better to burn it. Also because in the linear economy, it's incinerated, it helps a lot of producing the energy, warm the onsens. But anyhow, I will not go into this. Looking into the future, okay? So again, how are we going to support the recycling in the future also to make it easier for consumers? And also, how are we going to live in cities when people are abandoning the fields? Then the next is digitalization. All of our packages need to be intelligent packaging, that you scan it and immediately you know where it comes from. That technology exists today. We're simply not implementing because it has to have full traceability systems, and we have to do that together with our customers. But a lot of the technology that it's needed to drive more sustainable behaviors exists today. It's just that maybe it's still too expensive to implement. But intelligent packaging will be the norm. And one of the elements for, like, how can young generations help? I think this innovation challenge is very important. We are trying to work, for instance, on intelligent things that can detect when a product goes wrong. But those are technologies that are still too expensive, and maybe some of those are experimental, but we need new technologies. So, video, please.
I wish I could see exactly where they picked these tea leaves. It says India, but does that mean Delhi or Goa? And how did this yogurt get here? I hope it was made locally, so it didn't waste too much CO2. This packaging is recyclable, but how do we make sure more products are recycled? So in the future, the packaging can tell me all about the journey of the ingredients?
Exactly. But one thing is getting the raw materials. Another is making sure that the food is processed and packaged. Processing and packaging of food is quite difficult due to its sensitivity. That's why manufacturers have so much to gain from optimizing their operations through the use of digital technologies.
How will that help anything?
In the future, manufacturers will have a real-time view of their operations. Armed with this data, they can spot both issues before they happen, as well as improvements that they didn't know existed. All this means that they will produce more at a lower cost with a smaller environmental footprint.
That's great. Where are all my favorite foods? When I'm at the supermarket, the products are often sold out or close to expiring.
This will be solved. In the future, by using predictive analysis, retailers and e-tailers will only receive the right products in correct amounts at the right time. This will ensure the effective use of space and enable more efficient management of product expiry dates.
Amazing! Then Mum will not have to throw away so much milk. And in the future, will I also be able to learn much more about the products I buy?
Yes, intelligent packages with interactive labels will enable transparency in terms of raw material origination, nutritional content, and ethical profile.
I care a lot about recycling and the environment, but I think many people don't know where and how to recycle products. Sometimes it's not easy to do, I guess. Can this be improved?
This is where it gets really interesting. Cartons, recycling bins, and devices can all be connected. This will make recycling more convenient, efficient, and sustainable, and will benefit both consumers and, even more importantly, the whole planet.
Great!
At Tetra Pak, we are committed to improving sustainability, flexibility, and productivity in the food and beverages industry. By making smarter use of tomorrow's technologies, we aim to unleash the true power of connectivity. We are ready to connect consumers to producers and farms to forks. Let's make food smarter together.
So we think that this is part of the future. Actually, we did a promotion with Alibaba where you went to these intelligent bins and you collected points every time you put a Tetra Pak of a brand called Bright Dairy in China. You gain points, and with those gain points, you get free tickets to amusement parks, you get prizes. So this already exists. So, of course, you need the full value chain to contribute, but these technologies, most of the ones you saw there already exist. Then I wanted just to say something. Yep. Sorry. Oh, sorry. Apologies. So one of the very important things is it's not everything about food waste. It's also about what we're going to do about the planet. I personally love meat, but I have to say that I have tasted a lot of the new food fermentation technologies, which are meats made out of proteins, normally mushrooms or milk proteins, but it's milk without cows, milk without cows, or meat without animals. And I can tell you, precision fermentation technology, the experts say, will be 10% of the whole food consumption globally by 2030. It is dramatically more sustainable. Then also plant-based food. In Tetra Pak, already in our own canteens where we serve food to more than 20,000 employees, we have committed that we will start with at least 1/3 of the food served will be plant-based. So already leading by example, we think that will go very quick to 50% because employees will ask. The other key element is, of course, how we source the energy. So today, 80% of the energy we source globally for all of our factories from renewable resources. We have still 20% to go, but I think every little step towards making a more sustainable planet counts. And it's the decade of action. Everything that we don't, it will be too late if we don't act now. And this is what I was just telling you. It needs to be renewable, recyclable, carbon neutral package, high performance energy processing and production technology, and then being able to reduce energy and water by 50% in all of our equipment. And of course, we need to have more fully plant-based packaging. This is 8.8 billion out of 200 million. It's still too little, the ones that are 100% with bio-based or fully renewable resources. And in the caps, it's 12 billion caps. Some of the products that you had, actually the caps are made from sugarcane. It's 12 billion out of 80 billion that we sell. So that's better, but still we have a long to go, and that's Tetra Pak, but we're committing to basically transform the industry. And this is some of the examples. So this is the school milk in Japan. Hopefully, by the end of next year, 100% of the school milk or packages that we provide will be made from 100% renewable resources and carbon neutral. And we're already starting to implement this as of September this year. We made also more than 20 million euros investment in our Gotemba factory to be able to laminate these bio-based materials. So we're putting a lot of money in Japan to be able to source this sort of materials. Something that is very important, we reached our peak emissions as Tetra Pak in 2010. From 2010 to 2019, we managed to reduce by 40%. And from 2019 to 2022, actually, we reduced an additional 36%. So despite we have been growing between 5 and 10% every year, our volumes, we have been reducing our emissions. So I think that's very important. And we are certified by science-based targets. So it's not Tetra Pak saying, it's a third-party audit being able to say this. So you need to be very transparent on your goals, and you need to be very transparent what you declare. And this is something that I would like to discuss with. I discussed it with many CEOs in Japanese companies, but I think we're still far away from the awareness. So what is a black swan? If you're not aware with black swans, before COVID-19, there was always a black swan every year for the economy. It's an unexpected event that transforms your business, or in that year that transformed that year. So we are very used to black swans, but we have never had a gray rhino or a black rhino. Sustainability is the gray rhino, because you know it's coming, and you know that rhinos cannot change direction. So you know it's coming. We have seen it for the last 3 years, but we are not reacting. And then legislation comes, and we decide to wait for legislation before we do good. My recommendation to all businesses in Japan and outside Japan is don't wait for the legislation to come. You know it will come. That's rather rhinoceros. You can see it coming. It will hit you. Either you prepare and act, or you wait. I can tell you today I see a lot of companies waiting. You need to be ahead of legislation. And that will only happen if you do things differently. If you think the old way will open new doors, I can tell you there will be companies that if they do not act and react fast, they will be out of business, because the change is much faster than you expect. And I can tell you, I have a commitment, personal commitment, to leave not only, let's say, my family, my colleagues, my company, but the society I live in a better place than I found it. So I have a commitment also to Japan. Try to leave the situation for decarbonization in Japan in a much better place than I found it. And we're members of Japan Climate Leaders Platform, where more than 200 companies are members. And there we're trying to really make sure that we accelerate the decarbonization initiatives. Because Tetra Pak alone cannot, government alone cannot. It has to be a joint effort between industry, government, business, and consumers. And then the future starts today, not tomorrow. And change starts with us. I would like to end with a video.
Some call me nature. Others call me Mother Nature. I've been here for over 4.5 billion years. 22,500 times longer than you. I don't really need people, but people need me. Yes, your future depends on me. When I thrive, you thrive. When I falter, you falter. Or worse. But I've been here for eons. I have fed species greater than you, and I have starved species greater than you. My oceans, my soil, my flowing streams, my forests, they all can take you or leave you. How you choose to live each day, whether you regard or disregard me, doesn't really matter to me. One way or the other. Your actions will determine your fate, not mine. I am nature. I will go on. I am prepared to evolve. Are you?
Thank you.
アレハンドロ社長、本当にありがとうございます。今お話しいただいた通り、やっぱり今から大切になってくるのは会社さん、そして会社だけに問わず、いろんな団体、皆さんが透明化を進めていくことだと思います。で、透明化を進んでもやっぱり大切なのはなんでやらないといけないの、 なんでそこから食べ物が来ているの、それって本当に大丈夫なのっていう疑問視をすることです。でその声っていうのを心の中に留めず、一緒にいろんな人たちに共有していくところからスタートするっていう対話でした。ありがとうございます。皆さん大きな拍手お願いします。はい、ではここからは、パネルディスカッションの準備に進めてまいりますので、ななみさんにお願いいたします。
皆さんありがとうございます。皆さんお話はいかがでしたか？すごい興味深かったですよね。スウェーデンに住んでいて、すごいテトラパックも2駅先にあったんですけど、本当に知らないことばっかりですごく私自身も勉強になることばかりでした。でただいまこの後のディスカッションの準備をしておりますので、少々お待ちください。オンラインの方々は YouTube のコメント欄や概要欄にあるリンクより質問やコメントをご投稿ください。YouTube リンクにピン止めされているところからアクセスをお願いいたします。どうでしたか？
私もスウェーデンに留学していたんですけど、スウェーデンのそのサーキュラーエコノミーのこととかあまりこう勉強したことがなかったのですごく新鮮でした。あとテトラパックのなんか新しいそのテクノロジーを使っていろいろとこうパッケージで見られるようになるっていうところがすごくこう興味深くて、そんな未来が来るといいなと思いました
ありがとうございます。それではディスカッションの準備ができたみたいなので、マナさんよろしくお願いいたします。
はい、ありがとうございます。皆さん、2人の話聞いてどうでしたかっていうすごい感想が気になっていたので、ななみから意見をいただいて本当にありがとうございました。さて、お二人にお話を聞きたいということで、イヤホンを取ってしまった一人がいるので、英語で話した方がいいというサインかもしれませんね。じゃあ私は英語で今回話すことにします。I think the ambassador has taken off his earphones, so I'm going to speak in English. Oh, you have it? Okay, no, it's perfect. All right, I'll speak in Japanese in that case. But yeah, 2人がお話しする中で、やっぱり今回大切なサステナビリティを自分ごと化することが大きなテーマだったと思います。で、今回ちょっと2人にお話を、質問をしたいんですが、参加登録時に上がってきたたくさんの質問の中から質問を選んできました。で、最初に皆さんに提示したいポイントがあります。1つ目ですごいたくさんの方が聞いてきたのが、スウェーデンはサステナビリティ先進国ですが、どのようにしてサステナビリティのマインドセットが醸成されたのでしょうかっていう質問です。これは先に大使にお渡ししてもいいですか、この質問は。
If it's there it is. Thanks for your question. In one way, I'm more curious to hear what the audience thinks than that Alejandro and I keep on talking even more. But okay, first of all, Sweden is not paradise. That's very important to remember. I think the beauty with my country is that the challenges that faces Sweden, we have a certain ability to actually talk about them. We are brave to put it on the table. We disagree and we discuss. How come? Well, we start enormously early. I think already in preschool and in the first school years and all throughout the Swedish education system, the challenge from the teachers, be it young or older children, is think for yourself. Don't believe everything that the sensei or the teacher is telling you. Don't buy everything that you read in the books. Use it. Use that information, but switch on your own brain. And I'm saying this because we have been taught, and I'm a bit over 50 now. When I was in school, there was a huge campaign called Keep Sweden Clean. And we were out there cleaning up stuff in parks and in forests. And then we came home to our parents and we saw what they did. And then we said, you can't throw that away. And then we have homeschooling or food science, or whatever you call it in English, where we're taught very early as young boys and girls, together, not sexually separated, together, how do you cook food in a smart and sustainable way? And then we come home to our parents and we see that they have bought some things or they are throwing away food. And we say, what are you doing? I still get this challenge from my kids, and sometimes I get a bit tired, but I also realize it's very good. When I say I'll go to a business trip to Sweden, they say, why are you crazy? Your carbon emission to fly from Tokyo to Stockholm is absurdly big. If you really go, you have to have a very great reason. You can't just go for a couple of days. And that challenge to me is important, that the kids actually asks you and tells you. So in short, the school, I think enlightened teachers and kids that ask questions, that has created that important aspect of the Swedish society.
ありがとうございます。そうですね。そのお話を聞いていて、やっぱり日本の中でももっと子どもが SDGs について考えるっていう、タイミングがすごい増えてきていると思うんですが、その次のステップとしてどんな行動をすればいいのかなっていうところまでまだなかなかいけてないと思うので、スウェーデンから学びながら双方向で、互いを刺激し合っていけるとは思います。ありがとうございます。で、それに続いてアレハンドロ社長にも質問をしたいんですが、企業の中でどうすればサステナブルを自分ごと化する仕組みというのを社員の皆さんに促していますか？I think the mic's not on.
Hello? Okay. So I think it's a lot of small things. There's not a silver bullet. So we have started, number one, reusable cups. So single-use cups, even if they're from paper, they're not good enough. So reuse. That's number one. The second one, think on all of your carbon impacts. So we have started to measure the carbon impact that the food we buy for our canteen has on the planet, and to reduce food waste. So actually, we have started measuring what is the food waste and put targets on reducing food waste. So it's very important that you measure and you put targets to what you do. The third one is our office in Tokyo is 100% fully renewable energy. So when we were looking for office, we might have seen cheaper things, maybe some that were better, but we wanted also one that had 100% renewable energy. So again, whenever you're taking those decisions, every single one of those decisions has to pass the sustainability criteria. Then the fourth is for us. Today, it's very expensive, so we don't make money doing the renewable materials 100%. But it's good. It's the way to lead the industry, to show that we care. So actually that one, we said we're moving all of the school milk to fully renewable material, even if we don't make any penny. It's doing what's right. It's leading the industry. So I think doing small things in all of the aspects makes a difference. Yeah, I think that's a little bit.
ありがとうございます。そうですね。なんか今アレハンドロ社長がお話しする中でとてもキーワードで出てきたのが、さっきもそうなんですが、lead the industry、 その業界を自分たちが引っ張っていく役割をちゃんと担うことだと思います。で、日本の場合は多くの社長さんと話している中で、どうしてもその法律が変わるのまでを待っているという話がありました。それはやはりそのサステナビリティをどう変えていけばいいのかなという前向きな姿勢よりかはちょっと受け身な体質だからと見えてくると思います。で、そういうポイントにおいてテトラパック社としては食ロスを取り組むことでサプライチェーンをどうやって変革していこうとされていますか
So again, I think our contribution to the industry is much more than paper packaging. No, so I made some example before, which is the first thing is analyze and measure what the CO2 emission in the factory of our customers. Just for your information, our scope 3 is our customers' scope 1 and 2. So they should be very interesting on what we have to tell them about carbon emissions. But the first thing is to measure them. Few Japanese companies are measuring their carbon emissions. So, okay, measure. Then, okay, how can we reduce them? And then Tetra Pak can help them because we have committed and we already have equipment that reduces by 30% water, energy, and food waste. So that's one example. The second one, we want to assess together with them how to reduce the materials that they use. So example given, there's a lot of paper or plastic wrapping in the packs. What happens if we simplify the packaging? Do we need so much packaging? Maybe not. And we want to make sure that they can sell that value to consumer. The first thing that I heard when I came to Japan, you know, there's, if you go to Europe, you go to a supermarket and maybe everything is palletized and ready to open, not multi-packed around. And that, when you come here, say no, because it has a little spot during transport and Japanese will throw it away. Let's educate them to see the product is good. Yes, it might have a minor defect that it's a visual defect, nothing to do with the quality of the product. But if we want to transform society, we need to accept some of the defects that do not affect food security. So we have a huge role to play, and we cannot wait for legislation to come. Like I say, we need to be ahead of legislation. And when legislation comes, if your brand is leading the sustainability, the consumers will reward with more loyalty.
ありがとうございます。そのポイントの中でやはりawareness がとても大切だったと思います。皆さんが認識をして自分の行動を変えていくっていう話だったと思います。で、大使にお話を聞きたいと思うんですが、どうすればその個人 Oh, really? Oh, no worries. Oh, she's back. Okay, no, that's totally fine. Now, I was just mentioning how there is an importance of discussing how the consumer can make a very impactful change. And as you said in your presentation, there is a lot of responsibility from the consumer side and some actions that could be seen in place. So I'm quite curious in Sweden, how do not just young people, but different generations try to showcase that the individual behavior can make an impact for sustainability in circular economy?
First again, I want to say Sweden is not perfect here. It's very important not to create this too much of a rosy picture. And with the world economy suffering and with inflation going up, of course, households also suffer. So I'm not saying that every person makes a correct choice every time. If it's cheaper to buy something that is perhaps more of has more of a complicated traction. But I think there is a constant discussion and there is a way of having public awareness with a lot of companies like Tetra Pak, but also civil society organizations and engaged people in society, not least the young generations that feel that we are living on borrowed times, to constantly enlighten the consumers on what they are doing. Also, there's a lot of media reporting on following up on food and other consumer goods traceability. Where does it come from and where does it end? And then there is a lot of symbolic actions. So here in Japan, for example, I divert from your question, but I want to say it. Here in Japan, for example, when we very often do dinners and lunches at the Swedish residence, we have deliberately done many crooked vegetable meals or deliberately avoiding meat meals, using those crooked carrots or just the stems of the broccoli to do something. Of course we eat meat. I'm just like Alejandro, I like meat. But instead of having a continuous consumption, do it more seldom. But when you go for it, have higher quality. I think that's an awareness that is important.
Thank you so much. I think the action really shows themselves as to what you can do. Oh, no worries. Sorry about that. 日本語で話します。失礼しました。その認識の変え方っていうのはとても大切だと思いますし、どうすればいいのかっていうのはやはりそういった情報への今入ってないですかね。大丈夫ですか。多分私が勝手に日本語に変えたことで通訳の方が困惑しているだけだと思います。申し訳ないです。そうですね。先ほど話をしていたのがそのサステナビリティどうすればいいのかなっていう認識を広めるためには情報へのアクセスがとても大切だと思います。でそういった国外で実施できているアクションがもっと日本の中でも入れば真似もできますし、逆に日本流でこんなこともできてるんだよっていうことをもっと外にも発信できるかと思います。でそういった個人のレベルから企業のレベルの活動においてやはりこれからはアレハンドロ社長が話をしていた通り、循環型社会だけではダメだし、脱炭素だけではダメ、両方を両立していかなければいけないという話がありました。でそれは、食の安全保障につながっていると思うんですが、食の安全保障を日本の中でももっと、バランスよくしていくためにはどうすればいいとお考えですか？
I don't know if I fully got the question, but if I didn't got it right, please, because it was in the middle of the translation. So, food security and food safety is something that is not talked a lot in Japan. Okay, so food security, I'm going to give you some data points. 60 years ago, Japan used to produce almost 70% of the food requirements or nutritional requirements for the population. Today, that number has gone down to 35. It means if Japan can no longer import food, we would have starvation of the population. As simple as that. That's a data point on food security. And I don't see any government talking about food security. So I think this is something that it's very important. How can we produce more of what we eat locally? Okay, I think that's very important for the future. It doesn't mean that we will stop importing some of the other food. It means that I think it's time to balance more. Okay. To give you another example, Singapore. Whoever has been there, very small place, small island, and they have declared that 30% of their food security or their food nutrients will be self-produced by 2030. And that can only happen through precision fermentation. And that's a country that is thinking about food security. So what is the food security strategy for Japan? I think this is a question. So then food safety. We should discuss more about it because it's a given in Japan, because I can tell you it's possibly one of the top 1 or 2 food in the world. But the best before date today, how it is interpreted and used in legislation and by companies in Japan, is supporting food waste. And we need to reduce food waste. So how can we make sure that we adapt the legislation, we work together with the industry, with the retailers, in order to change the way it is today to reduce food waste in the whole value chain? So again, this is questions. I don't have the answers, but I think we have good ideas, and we need more ideas, and we need more movements to avoid food waste. So this is some of the things that we should be discussing more, not only decarbonization, which is the highest thing in the agenda, how to move, and let me just add this, how to move from a fossil-intensive country and drive the green transition. And it's not being talked enough, but today the dependence on fossil fuels, of natural gas, coal, and petrol is too high in Japan. And that's energy security. So I'm talking about food security, but I'm talking about energy security. And that's also not being discussed. And also how we can transition to more green. And I'm going to build on something that consumer power, no? It's linked to the question before. I have never seen a plastic bottle that says, I come from Africa, from this place where we had to extract and move all of the orangutans in that region. So I'm exaggerating, but we should ask all producers, Tetra Pak, all the producers of plastic bottles to declare the origin. There should be full transparency value chain, and then the customer can decide which brand and which package to use. But today, the packaging industry is not transparent. So what we can do to lead the industry is be very transparent. Tell you exactly from which forest our raw materials come from. Exactly from where our caps come from. And the CO2 emissions impact. Not only the product, but the packaging. So I honestly would like to say, okay, if this is recycled PET, okay, where does it come from? Okay, so I think we need to be more transparent as an industry.
Thank you so much. I got a note that I need to speak in English, so I'm going to speak in English, and you won't need your earphones from your own words. But yeah, no, thank you so much for the point for the transparency. And there is a lack to understand where things are coming from, how many processes are actually included into making one item. I think most people don't know how many people are part of the supply chain. But in terms of, I would like to open the questions to the audience because we do have lovely guests, and I know that we've actually are pressing with time. So in terms of how to ask a question, I would like you to raise your hand and do ask a question as we have our lovely intern to bring over the mic to you and ask a question. Whether it can be either about energy security and how it's connected to food, or how do you increase transparency, or anything really in terms of asking to the ambassador and Alejandro. But I'd like to open the floor. Would you mind if I give the mic to the lady in the middle? Yes, her. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the presentation. In the ambassador's presentation, you mentioned about the business or a company could not survive without thinking about sustainability in the future. And I feel like we customers also have to choose and buy and pay extra for like sustainability considerate products. So I feel like it's mandatory for consumers. And I would like to know, since both of you had experience working in developing countries, how is the situation in developing countries, because they can't afford the higher price, which is considered for sustainability. So what do you think about that?
Thank you very much. Of course, it's very difficult to generalize, but I lived in three countries in Africa. I lived for several years. And the number one comment is, I think in many ways, it is more sustainable, because if you have little money, you will not at all consider to buy expensive stuff that comes from half a world away. You will go for the potatoes or the onions or the veggies or the local products that are there. That's number one. Number two is I hesitate very much to demand. Everyone needs to take responsibility. But I think the level of responsibility that needs to be taken by us, by Sweden, by the Hoku countries, by Europe, by Japan, by US, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, is much higher than the so-called developing countries. So I think we need to lead by example, and we need to realize that we are the ones that have been polluting immensely for since the Industrial Revolution, or since the last 100 years. But of course, if you have less money, it's less possible to do anything, that's for sure. Therefore, subsidizes also can play an important role.
Thank you.
So thank you very much for your question. So there's two key issues that need to be addressed in developing countries. Number one is first start to feed the poor. No, so there's still 20% under the line of poverty, which is living under $3 per day. So for an entire family. So I think first we need to feed those people. I think that's a big challenge. And after COVID, I think the number of people that were not nourished enough went from 400 million to 800 million. So we were on a very good trajectory until COVID for that start. So first we need to feed the poor people. The second one, the issue there is waste. So if you see today, 80% of the plastic that goes into ocean comes from 5 countries, which are in Asia. It's India, China, Indonesia, Vietnam, and I forget the fifth one. But so there, the first thing is campaigns anti-littering. So in Japan or in South Korea, you would not see because there's absolutely no trash. But there, it's about trash. So how to collect it, and then how to recycle it. But today, the worst or the biggest enemy is littering.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I do have a quick question regarding that, because we pointed out that it's really difficult for people who are poor to make that decision, but they can leverage it. But for example, in Japan, we have over 90% of the companies are small to medium size. So how do you think we can actually support a faster transition of those companies as well, in order to have a bigger transition that isn't necessarily just for a large company? I think that's where
I will make I will oversimplify very much your question. The first one is make sure that Japan accelerates the green transition. What do I mean? Energy transition. We need to move to green energy and make it affordable as fast as possible. So basically the suppliers of energy plus the government, they need to take bold and immediate actions. And maybe larger companies, we are prepared. We're a medium company in Japan, but I think we're a large company globally. So large companies, maybe we are able to pay a little more for the energy to subsidize cheaper energy for small and medium-sized companies, as long as it is green energy. So that would be a little bit how to help the whole industry move away from carbon-intensive technologies.
Thank you so much. On to the next question. I think I saw a few hands over there. Ashley, would you like to have a question? 日本語でも質問は全然大丈夫ですので。
Thank you very much for your amazing presentation. I want to ask both of you, because I believe both of you have had some kind of conversations with Japanese company, like people from the Japanese company, or maybe the people who are involved in the government. So my question is, what do you think, so what prevents Japanese companies from acting immediately? Because as a student, I've talked with lots of people from the Japanese companies, and on paper, their strategy regarding sustainability looks very well. However, if we look at the outcome, it doesn't seem that well. So I wanted to ask you, what prevents Japanese companies from acting immediately towards sustainability?
I would argue vote, I don't know how to say it in Nihongo, but vote with your feet. I think the very, very tragic developments in Ukraine the last 1.5 years, but the world's reaction to the Russian aggression in and invasion of Ukraine has shown that consumer power really works, that consumers don't want to buy things that has been originating from Russia, in Europe, if you have big European or Japanese companies that in the first few weeks of the conflict said, we will remain in Russia because we need to make sure that the workers and the consumers get access to the food. It's not the people's fault that the government is launching a war. It could be true in one sense, but the consumers have reacted. They are boycotting things. So when I meet Japanese politicians, and I meet many that are quite engaged when it comes to climate and sustainability, it's still not a sense of urgency of a demand from the Japanese people. And you know how politicians are all over the world. If there is a democracy, they're very sensitive to what the voters will say. So what I want to throw the question back a little bit to the audience. One of the things that perhaps makes me lose a little sleep at night, and I wonder why it is, that the Japanese people is not higher in its demand, that we want not only talk, we also want action.
So I think it was very good. And I read the news a lot, and I see that young Japanese don't vote a lot. So I think maybe you should vote more. But again, it's a democracy, it's a free country. So, but when it comes to the industry, I agree with you. There is still no sense of urgency. So I think still in the boardrooms in Japan, sustainability is important, especially in those that are stock listed. Those that are still family-owned and close company, it is in the agenda because it's good to show. But since it does not impact their P&L, there's no sense of urgency. Since there is no legislation, there's no sense of urgency. I do believe legislation will come faster. Japan will have to implement some sort of legislation by 2025 for the Osaka World Expo to show some progress. And I think there will be a very good discussion in the coming year. I think in legislation, I think now the parliament and the Japanese Diet is having very good discussion on what to do, and it's involving the industry for the GX fund. And so I think there's good intentions, then how to transform that into the right legislation and to bring the industry into that discussion, into something that it's implementable. I think that will be the challenge, but it has to be done. And I hope more companies go ahead of legislation and not behind legislation. It's the famous rhino. It's coming, it will come. Don't wait for it to hit you.
Thank you so much. Oh, sorry.
I really agree with what you both said. And like one thing, so we two are both from Keio University with students, and one thing we are trying to do is like create a place for like people from the companies, like from the private sector, from the so like lots of industries, and we're trying to create a place that people who are engaged in those kind of CSR activities in each companies. We're trying to create a place.
Sorry, do you mind if I go on to the next question? You will be able to talk to them later. So sorry about that. We're actually pressing with the time. Apologies. To the next question. For people online, you are able to drop in your question via YouTube. There is a link which will connect you to the Mentimeter, which is an online question toolkit. So please throw your questions there, and I'll look at my screen to pick up a couple later on. And to open the floor, would anyone like to go on to asking? I think the lady on the side there, please. Thank you.
ありがとうございます。企業側の目線で見たときに、先ほどそのサステナブルな取り組みで業界をリードしてグローバルにリーディングカンパニーとしてサステナブルにするというのは非常に共感でいいなと思うんですけど、同時に利益を生み出さないといけないというのがビジネスだと思うので、その理想の向かう先と現実にその消費者にとって企業として利益を生み出すという側面、ビジネス的な側面も同時に考えていかないと 企業として存続というのは難しいかなというふうに考えているんですけど、サステナブルを追求することによって、例えばそのサステナブルなマテリアルがバージン素材よりも高かったりとかコストがかかるっていう現実においては、企業としてどのように向き合っているのかというところと、あとは実際にその直面しているチャレンジだったりとかいうのがあれば教えてほしいです。
So the first thing, I fully agree with you. No change or transition is easy. Not for Tetra Pak. We are also not perfect. We have a lot of defects, and there's so many things that we need to change. So the energy and materials transition at the beginning will be a bit more expensive, but I agree with you. The companies needs to be profitable, because they normally, what we do is we reinvest everything in either innovation or new technology, and also because, let's remember, we also have responsibility to the people that work to pay the salary. So a responsible company would not make losses, okay? So that I fully agree. Then the way to convince the customers and really do what's good is really put, ideally, science-based targets. No? Put your targets, declare them, and be transparent about them. Okay, don't hide, because the important is the progress that you show and the destination. We will not be able to go to net zero but in our own operations until 2030. But our progress is good, and we are sharing it, and we're very, very transparent. In Japan, for example, we have an issue with green energy availability. We want to buy more. There's no green energy in Japan to buy. So there's a challenge also of supply. Example, recycled PET. Even if Coca-Cola, Suntory that want or are moving to recycled PET would like to move to 100% recycled bottles, it's not possible today. There's not enough quantities. And if the quantities there are double the price. So they would have to increase prices to consumers to protect margins. So I think there is always a balance, but what is not acceptable is that there is no transparent science-based targets, and all companies, or at least the ones that are leading the industry, should have very clear and transparent targets and basically be able to communicate them.
Thank you so much. I think we're actually pressing with time and we need to start wrapping up. But I think the point is that the transparency bit, there is a lot of talks on the European side about the SWiTCH and regenerative thinking and mode of process, but that methodology necessarily hasn't been implemented fully in Japan. And one of the questions I actually want to pick up as the last question for our talk tonight is from a young person. It says, it says, thank you so much for your presentation. And they're curious, what, as a youth, can they do? They don't have a really big status within a company, nor have they experienced the society of how to change it. But what can youth do in order to change its food system? So what are your expectations for Japanese youth to create a better, more sustainable food system in general right now? So we'd love to hear from the ambassador and then on to Alejandro.
Well, first of all, I'm the Swedish government's representative in Japan, so my job is not at all to give any advice to Japan, what Japan should or should not do. But as friends, and it's like-minded countries is much more that unites us than separates us. I think youth in Japan should realize that they have a lot more power in their hands than they actually realize. Because even if your question is very correct, business wants to stay in business, of course, but if there are no consumers, there will be no business. And that's why I think in Europe and in my country, business has realized this quicker than governments. So it's actually businesses and companies that are leading the sustainability change. It's not coming out of legislation from above, it's coming from business that realize we want to stay in business for long, we need to change now or we'll go out of business later. And then I think young people in Sweden know that their voice means something, and that's not Swedish, that's global. As long as we have democracies, everyone's voice means something. And I'm sure you heard about this movement, Future for Friday, or Friday Future. It was a Swedish lady. She's not a young child anymore. Now she's grown up, Greta Thunberg. And she stopped going to school, and she brought thousands and thousands of friends with her on Fridays, and they were sitting outside the Swedish parliament. And some people frowned upon it, some people laughed about it, but that created a movement that really pushed politicians to change. I'm not asking Japanese youth to start demonstrating, that's not my idea, but my idea is that your voice counts. So join a political party, start a group like you did here at KU University, or start a consumer group that asks grocery stores to provide information on what they are selling. Go to clothing stores and say you want to know where the shirt you're buying, where it comes from and how it was made, and realize that you have an important say. And here internationalism comes in as well. There are several Japanese companies that know that if they're going to produce things, they need to have green energy, just like Alejandro is saying. And I don't want to name companies, but you know, if you Google and if you read newspapers, that some Japanese companies have been forced to move elsewhere in order to live up to that demand from global companies. So I want to encourage all young Japanese to feel that you have a voice, use it, because it can make a difference.
I would love to hear your opinion too, though, in general, because, well, I guess you don't have anything else you would like to add.
No, I think the answer has been very thorough, but I do believe that youth has a responsibility to ask companies for more transparency, and it can be like through consumers associations or simply by buying products actually that go more with your values. So what consumers are doing in Europe is they really buy products from companies that are close to their values and their belief systems. I think we should not give up on that. And if you don't find it, I think there's ways to tell companies, look, I need this type of products. And I still believe Japanese consumers, since there's a lot of choice, you cave into whatever you have available, even if it goes against your belief system.
Thank you so much, you two. I think we had a pretty good talk tonight, and I'm sure we are not done with the talk. So I would like the other kids to ask some questions during the networking session following. Tonight we did have the points really given that it's not the problem of how to do it, but it's more about the commitment yourselves of will you make that transition, and will you see that gray rhino coming at you and you wait until it hits you, or do you prepare yourself in order to make that bigger change for not just yourself, but also for the community around you and also for the whole of society? Because I think the video was quite, it's not dramatic, but it really touches the point of, you know, the planet isn't there just for you, but they're fine. But are we fine as humans? We're not quite ready yet. So how do we balance this connection between the earth and human society as well? But thank you so much, you two, for the talk. It was really lovely to hear your comments. And right now, I would like to actually move on to the next session, which is the Koryu Kai. But before that, I would like to ask everyone to give a big round of applause for the two of the lovely lecturers. はい、ありがとうございます。本日皆さんお話しいただいた通り、大切なのは一歩ずつから前進していくことですが、コミットメントをちゃんと掲げることですね。で、本日のために、スウェーデン大使館、そして日本テトラパック株式会社、そしてスカンジナビアジャパン笹川財団の皆さんのご協力をもとでこの準備を進めさせていただきました。本当に皆様のお力すごいありがとうございます。 それではここからは交流会に進みたいと思いますので、ななみさんにお願いいたします。